are live. Okay, go ahead.
All right, hi folks. I'm Mayor Shamus Malik, and I'm here with Finance Director Steve Fricker.
Hello, everyone.
And we are having our city budget, 2024 budget live stream. So we are here to answer your questions, here to talk a little bit about what this year's city operating budget does. And then also we have a budget town hall tonight from 6 to 8 p.m. at Firestone Community Learning Center. So you're all welcome to that. But we would love if folks are able to join now and watch now and ask us any questions that you have. This is all part of my commitment and my administration's commitment to transparency. We spent the last week presenting this budget to Akron City Council, and then now are working through the process of what amendments we would propose to the budget, and then hopefully we'll complete the budget process. We have to. By law by the end of March. So hopefully next Monday we'll have a completed budget here for the city. So this year's budget outlines $815 million in investments, which is an awful lot of money. This is a 2.1% increase from last year's budget, and it's primarily due to staffing costs. Income tax and property tax are expected to be higher this year. Obviously, we saw the increased property tax valuations made through the state process. That was not a city decision, but that will offset the increase in expenditures. But we do feel 2.1% is reasonable and appropriate. Do you want to add anything there?
Sure. So, I mean, and another big piece of this year's budget, as has been the case in the past couple of years, is we are still in the midst of our ARPA American Rescue Plan spending. So this year we have about $60 million slated to be spent as part of the ARPA program. And we will go through some of the details of those expenditures. But because we have that money now, it is making these budgets a little bit bigger than they were in the past. And that's just because the city was fortunate to receive about $145 million. And we're now spending that down really over 2022, 2023, and 2024. And then we will have, we think, about 85% or so of that money spent by the end of this year, but that we can still spend money into 2025 and 2026. So that's kind of a big driver of this budget. As the mayor said, it's $815 million, so it's up from about $798 million last year. And then it also, as the mayor mentioned, includes some extra staffing costs, and those are largely due to our bargaining agreement. So we had two of our unions, our ASME union and our CSPA union, that received 4% cost of living increases in 2024. And then our police and fire unions got 3%, and then non-bargaining employees got 3% as well. So those additional labor costs are included as part of the staffing in this budget.
Absolutely. So what does this budget do? There's a couple things we wanted to run through before we take your questions. It really promotes public safety as our first priority. And I've been very clear that our administration's biggest priority is safety. You can't do anything else unless folks are safe. And so we are hiring classes for both police and fire in 2024. And then we are also budgeting for the highest number of police officers in 20 years, 488 uniformed police officers, which will really help as we seek to do community policing so that we don't have officers going from call to call to call to call to call. We have more time to spend on some of that more proactive work that we want officers to do to build trust with the community. And 402 firefighter medics, the highest level in 30 years. And so we're really excited about opportunities to invest in our safety forces and make sure that these two large chunks of our city are able to operate in a way that hopefully will be even more effective than we've been in the past, especially to deal with gun violence and also to address EMS runs and a lot of the issues we've seen with fire. We also have created a new role to focus on retention and recruitment of safety forces. That's a problem around the country. And also to focus on emergency management, which has been a gap that the city has not focused on previously. Another big priority in the budget is that it does realign the mayor's office. We created a new strategy team, and we discontinued some prior roles. So basically, what we have here is that, with the new administration, over the course of our transition, we spent a lot of time focused on how we can look at what gaps there are in the city and where we feel we need to go to deliver on the vision for change and deliver on having an effective city government. And so we've restructured the mayor's office. We've cut several cabinet positions. We've moved a number of positions into the mayor's office. There was a grants manager role that was in finance that's moved into the mayor's office so it can be more connected to some of our lobbying efforts with the state and federal government. But then we've also created 8 new net positions. And there's been some questions and concerns over that, which I get. But I really want to kind of echo that if we're going to tackle some of these basic issues in our community, we have to make sure we have people who are dealing with them head on. And so of these 8 positions, 6 of them are below the cabinet level. These aren't the full freight salaries. But the city doesn't have an education department, right? But we should have somebody waking up every day thinking about what Akron Public Schools is doing and how our other educational partners fit into that. That's so critical to the future of our community. We don't have someone who's focused on public engagement. But if we're going to create a city government that really listens to people, then we have to have a role that helps do some of what we're doing here kind of on a shoestring right now. So it's really critical, and it amounts to $750,000 in new spending, which is nothing to sneeze at, but it's less than 0.1% of this budget. And so it's something I just wanted to level set on, because I promised with this new administration that I would deliver change. And so sometimes change is uncomfortable, sometimes change is different. And I want to let folks know why we're adding these roles and that it's not for show. For instance, just one of those roles, our policy and grant strategist, who's someone with a background in lobbying at the state level and the federal level, has already helped us secure $700,000 in partnership with the state and government and the Summit County Land Bank for the demolition of the Word Church property. It's $700,000 that the city would have missed out on, and that would be covered by taxpayer funds here locally if we hadn't been able to identify that. So that's part of why, and I hope folks can see as we go forward the value add, not just on some of these more macro issues, but also in our neighborhoods, right? The Word Church is a building that's blighted neighborhoods for years. So we're really excited about what we're proposing here. We're also prioritizing several strategic initiatives. And so I've talked a lot about safety, about economic development, about education. So we're investing $500,000 in youth out-of-school time extracurricular services with the new organization Youth Success Summit that's going to be working to provide kind of a strategic collaboration between all different entities that provide those extracurriculars to students to make sure every young person has opportunities here in Akron. $750,000 to launch the Thrive program, which supports small businesses here in our community with a focus on Black-owned businesses in particular. And then also $250,000 to start the city's planning for the bicentennial celebration that our advisory committee and Mark Greer with the new 501c3 and Dave Lieberth are helping lead. We're also investing in personnel and staffing, as has been mentioned, Steve mentioned. With any operating budget in a city of 2,000 employees, 69% of our general fund expenditures are labor related. We're adding some new roles in the service department, particularly around the city's water meter project. We're also adding a couple folks in our parks maintenance department to help with some of the staffing there, both with some of our downtown landscaping and then also in the neighborhoods as well with our tree canopy programs. The Akron Municipal Court is adding a mediator and a housing specialist. And then Akron City Council is also looking at adding a role around public policy and then also a community liaison role. So that budget's for 2018 full-time employees. And we also have, as Steve mentioned, a number of those ARPA expenditures. We are in a place where we've committed a lot of those funds, but now we're kind of implementing and doing the work. So $7.5 million in water main replacement, which will really help us get rid of those lead water mains. 28.9 million. I should have just rounded that to 29, but 29 million for our community centers, and also public spaces, including Lock 3, the Rubber City Heritage Trail, and others. So we're really excited about this. And then 7.5 million towards housing rehab and supporting our community development corporations. So that's some of what's in the budget, but for a little bit more detail, I'll turn it over to Steve.
Sure, thank you, Mayor. So one thing I want to explain is a little bit about what we're talking about here today, which is the operating budget. So the city really has two separate budgets, although they're linked together, and I'll kind of explain what that link is. But we have a capital budget, which we have already passed earlier this year, and that budget is designed to be a long-term budget. So we have a 5-year capital budget, and then each year we have a more narrowly focused 1-year budget, and that's what we passed earlier this year. And that budget is designed to make improvements and to add additional city infrastructure. So it's all of the capital infrastructure that the city has. Obviously, that's our roads, that's our water and sewer systems, that's our parks, our city buildings, our city facilities that we have. So the capital budget is designed to make improvements to those assets and in some cases add new assets. Then there is our operating budget, and that's what we're talking about here. So what we're talking about is actually appropriating the money. City Council will appropriate money for the city to spend both on its operations and for the items that were outlaid in the capital budget. So a little bit about what the difference between the capital budget and the operating budget is. So right now we're talking about the operating budget. This budget will be passed by council. As we said, we have to do it by March 31st. And then it can be amended throughout the course of the year. So typically the city will amend that budget, usually later in the year, and we may do it once or twice. So if there are changes that need to be made, we will go back to City Council and present those changes to them, and then they can pass legislation in order to modify the budget. One other thing I'll mention is, we're talking about an operating budget, but in reality, it's really a series of many smaller budgets. So the city, as any public sector entity, we have a number of funds within the city. So you often hear about our general fund, and I'll kind of explain what that is. That is the main operating fund of the city. But then we have many other funds where the expenditures in each fund are restricted by the types of revenue it receives. So we get a lot of grants, and those will have a specific fund. And then we have a water and sewer fund that are funded with the utility fees that our water and sewer customers have. And then we have capital project funds, which I just talked about, which are dedicated to spending on those capital assets that we're improving. And then we even have some internal service funds, which are divisions of the city, like our engineering bureau, that really do work on behalf of other divisions within the city, and they will actually charge back those other city divisions for the costs that they incur.
And some of those things like water and sewer capital, we keep them separate because those entities should run as kind of a business unto themselves.
Yes,
right?
and those funds are known as enterprise funds,
Yeah.
right? So those are designed to run, to be self-supporting and run, as the mayor said, like a business. So yeah, those expenditures are separate within those funds.
Yep.
Okay, I'm going to talk a little bit about the budget process. So really, this is about a 6-month process right now, and it typically runs from the third quarter of the prior year, or the fourth quarter of the prior year, I should say, through the first quarter of the new year. So we will start looking at our budget expenditures, late in the prior year. So in 2023, we started looking at our expenditures, meeting with our departments, and figuring out what their needs would be for 2024. And at the same time, we have some software that we use to develop models around all of our expenditures. So we have models that build what our staffing costs will be, what some of our revenues will be, what some of our expenditures will be based on inflation and things like that. So we really use some tools, and also obviously we're talking with our departments and figuring out what their needs are. So we take all of that information and we assemble that into a budget, and we also obviously check to see what our estimated revenues are going to be. So we match up what those budgeted expenditures would be with our estimated revenues, and we come up with a recommended budget that we then take to our city council in the form of an appropriation ordinance. So we take that piece of legislation to council, and then we will have which we just did last week, we have a series of hearings with city council, and those usually last about 3 days, where we have each department come in and present various aspects of their budget and kind of describe the operations that they intend to perform in the current year. And then council will look at all that information and then make a determination on adopting the budget.
And the budget hearings are kind of cool because, and I say this as a retired city councilman, because each department comes and really tells their story. And so it's really kind of interesting to see all the work that's done over the course of the year just in that short span of 3 days. And particularly, I think, during COVID, it was really great to see some of the stories that our department had of kind of the lengths that folks went, our folks down in, I think, water and sewer living in trailers to make sure that water and sewer still ran. So I always appreciate those budget hearings, and they're on YouTube if you want to go back and watch them.
Right. Now, that's the process for this year. What we are looking to do is potentially change that process where we would actually pass the budget before the end of this year for 2025. So we are looking at some changes in the schedule. We're also looking at potentially doing some participatory budgeting, and I think we're going to try to get some feedback tonight throughout the course of the year, but also tonight at our town hall on what the citizens think that might look like.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay, so as you mentioned, this budget is budgeting for 2,055 full-time employees. So just for a little bit of history on our staffing, the city for years throughout the 1990s and the 2000s, we were dropping staff. And now we've gotten to the point where we've been able to add back a little bit of staff. So since 2021, we've added 113 full-time positions to the city budget. The majority of that, about just over half of that, is within the police and fire safety forces. So a big emphasis has been placed on keeping our safety forces, well-staffed, and we try to add as much as we can. Obviously we have based on the revenues that we have, but we've added a bunch of staff in police and fire, and then also within our service departments as well over the past couple years. And I don't have the slide that we can show, but I did prepare a little slide that we'll share at our town hall tonight that really does show where the concentration of labor costs are, and that really is in 3 departments. It's in police, fire, and service that make up about 78% of the entire city workforce. And then all of the other departments like HR, finance, the courts, planning, integrated development, those make up the other 22% of the budget. So, the kind of the public-facing service departments, fire department, police department, those are the majority of this budget.
It's about 3/4.
It's about 3/4 of the budget, correct. Yep. Yeah. The general fund. So let's talk a little bit about the general fund as a whole, because that is the main operating fund of the city, and it really funds, to some extent, all departments. So all of our departments have some of their funding from the general fund. And that is the fund that it doesn't have a specific revenue source that it generates on its own. So it relies on the tax revenues that we get. So about 70% of the revenue from the general fund comes from taxes. and it relies on those taxes to fund those various operations, the biggest of which within the general fund are police and fire. So that's about, safety is about 70% of the general fund. The general fund budget for this year is about $210 million. That's up about $10 million from last year. And the big areas where that extra cost is one, just the wage inflation that we have, so it's the additional cost of living increases for the personnel. We also have, as many of you have read recently, and the mayor said at a press conference yesterday about this, the demolition of the Word Church is one of the items within that budget. We do expect to receive some revenue back to help cover the cost of that.
Hopefully the total cost.
Hopefully the total cost.
We're working
of that.
on it.
So the general fund is about a $210 million budget, and we are showing a balanced budget for the general fund, although that does partly rely on the budget stabilization funds that we are getting from the ARPA fund.
Yep.
Yeah. Okay. As I mentioned, taxes are the biggest source of funds for the general fund. So the city has a 2.25% tax, or 2.5% tax, I should say, which is the same as most of the other big Ohio cities. So Cleveland, Columbus, Dayton, and Toledo all are also at a 2.5% tax rate, and that tax gets distributed both to the general fund, our capital improvement fund, and then we had two separate tax levies that were done at different times. So one is our 0.25% tax that goes to rebuilding the schools, and that's our community learning center tax. That's a 0.25%. And then in 2018 or 2017, we passed our police fire roads tax that goes specifically to funding police fire and then our transportation infrastructure. So finally, I think I'll just cover a little bit about our ARPA spending. So we received approximately $145 million of ARPA funding. That money was actually received in 2021 and 2022. So we've been spending down that money since that time. To date, we've committed the entire $143 million. So we have it outlined in terms of what those expenditures are going to. Of that $143 million, we've obligated about $76 million, which means that we've entered into contracts with suppliers that are going to perform the services that we're doing with the ARPA funds, but we may not necessarily have spent that. So in terms of what we've actually spent, it's about $68 million. And we do actually have a website out there, and I'm going to read the website address, and this is available on our city website to get to it, but it's www.akronohiorescue.gov/progress. And if you go out to that website, there's actually a built-in application that is real-time, provides real-time updates of all of the expenditures within the ARPA funds.
Yeah, and I think our TV Magic team here behind the camera can probably put that link in the comments.
Okay.
There we go. And some of the buckets of what that money is being spent on include those water mains that I mentioned, violence intervention, a lot on the community centers and Lock 3, and also on the new pools, the new Perkins pool that opened last year, and then also we're going to be redoing the reservoir pool as well. So those are the couple big buckets of things that that money's been used for, including the home repair fund, and the home repair program, and some of the infill housing that we've been doing with other partners like community development corporations.
Okay, and with that, I think
There we go.
we're ready. We can have some questions. And
Yeah.
Cool. Okay, so we've had one question in the chat so far, so we'll start there. So Brandon had asked, when are they going to put more lighting in the parks?
It's a good question. I'm not sure that we've kind of tackled that, but we'd love to talk to parks maintenance and kind of see, and if there's maybe a particular park that Brandon's thinking of. But we definitely want our parks to be welcoming and safe public spaces.
Yeah.
And so,
and we do have every year as part of our capital budget, we actually typically have just kind of a line item for miscellaneous parks improvements, and that can cover all types of things like some of the playground equipment,
new benches,
yeah, some of the the kind of the basic things that we've come to expect in our city parks. So those are the types of things that would be lighting would be one of the items that would potentially be funded out of that source.
Absolutely. And then we've been working with Akron Parks Collaborative for the Akron Parks Challenge, where we'll pick 1 or 2 parks every year that we'll kind of do a much larger renovation on. So really excited about continuing that program as well. That was part of our capital budget.
Okay. Sorry, someone had asked a question, and I'm going to ask for an elaboration really quick, so we will circle back to his question. Okay, so some other questions. We have gotten a lot of feedback online from a lot of different folks, so we've kind of condensed some of those questions. So first question I've got here, why are you adding so many cops in a city that has had such a problem in recent years?
Yeah, I think that this goes back to kind of how I think about safety, which is that it's not something that's, decided in terms of black and white, but in shades of gray, which is that, I think we all want a safe community. We all want, police to be able to respond when there are emergencies or to help prevent the tragic gun violence that we see in the community. But we also want to make sure that, people in the community are treated with dignity and respect, including by the police who are paid with taxpayer dollars. And so part of that is that fundamentally, if we are just purely reactive as a police department, then we can never get to a place where we're building those relationships and building the trust and getting some of that proactive work done. And so making sure we have enough police officers on the job is really critical to make sure that we can do community policing, make sure that officers aren't just running from call to call to call to call to call for their entire shift, which is what happens when you do a ride-along, but that you also have time for some of those encounters that aren't an emergency, where folks can sit and chat with a neighbor on the stoop for 5 minutes and get to know that person and do more of those foot patrols and bike patrols that the late Councilman Rich Swirsky was so fond of. And so that's how we're thinking about it. But we're also committed to working constructively with our new police oversight board, and they're part of this budget as well, increasing transparency, improving our policies. So it's not like an either or. And I think when I go out and talk with folks in the community about safety, it has to be an all of the above. We have to address gun violence with our APD, but also we have to address gun violence with community-based initiatives that are working on the upstream cause of the problem. Sorry, I got a little fired up.
Yeah. And there's one thing to note about budgeting for both police and fire, and they're somewhat unique in that unlike all the other departments where when you have vacant positions, you have someone leave and then you have a vacancy and you hire one person. Police and fire have to hire in large classes, so they each have training academies. So, when we have officers and firefighters leave the department, we will typically either once or twice a year, and that's one of the things we've been able to do to help increase staffing is to have less of a time span between when we're doing these large classes of police officers or firefighters. So we hire them in classes. So the class in police was the largest one that we've done in several years. I believe it was 48.
48, yeah.
48. And that's the maximum amount that they can actually handle, just some of the logistics of how they have to do the academy. So so they got up to their highest level that they've been in several years, as the mayor said, with this last class that just came on really about a month ago.
Yeah, yeah. The cadets just started a month ago.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Cool. Thank you. Kind of in the same vein, someone, Brian, had just asked. We keep hearing about retention with the police department. What have you done to combat officers leaving to other municipalities? What is your plan on retention?
So a number of plans around retention. We want to look at, one, we want to create this position because it's really important to have, again, somebody working on this every day on a dedicated basis. But we want to look at what we can do and what incentive structures we can create. But the big thing to know here is that this is the last year of the police union contract. And so a lot of that is going to end up being negotiated into the contract. But we're looking at a ton of different things, not just retention, but we're looking at lateral hires for the first time ever. This is something we've never done. The only way you join the Akron Police Department is as a cadet going through the academy. We want to bring in people who have 5-10 years of experience in other jurisdictions, and then also look at how we build a pipeline from our middle schools and high schools. And you can't become an officer until 21, but if we can find something that you can do from 18 to 21 and really have that path for you, that will help. And the same is true with fire as well. And so we're really excited. Our current fire chief, Chief Natko, is going to be he's going to be working on emergency management, and then we're also going to be having another person help us with safety, retention, and recruitment. But in terms of retention, a lot of that is going to be determined by the collective bargaining agreement and how we negotiate with the union.
Thank you. Okay, jumping back to a previous question. So Laz had asked kind of around education. And specifically, what are we doing to pay teachers more and, paying teachers more and getting teachers that are really educated and not just because they are here from the area? Yeah,
so it's a good question. It might be a better question for the school board, right? And so that's the big point, is that we as a city, we're in charge of the police department, we're in charge of the fire department and the finance department and the street cleaning and the plowing. But we're not in charge of the schools. And so what I view my role as, or our administration's role as, or the city's role as, is to help. We don't control what happens in the classroom, and we don't control what happens in the home. We help support everywhere in between. And so the biggest piece there is with these CLCs, the community learning centers, that the city helped build with 0.25% of our income tax. And then how we help with the supports and the structures and extracurriculars that folks have. And so we have a robust relationship with Akron Public Schools. The superintendent was actually sitting right where the camera is just last week, I think, in our meeting. But we're letting them handle the teacher side of things. But absolutely, when it comes to some of the needs that students have that might be served, kind of wraparound services as they call, whether it's mental health programs or financial counseling or sports and wellness or other things, we want to be there to help provide that support. So that's what we're really excited about.
Yeah, we actually have a contract where we actually help support some of the after-school programming too as part of the city budget.
Yep.
Thank you. All right, so next question. Mayor, why are you investing in top-heavy city administration instead of the hardworking people in service and Parks and Rec?
Yeah, well, it's a both and. But I mentioned at the beginning of the thing is that I don't believe what we're doing is top heavy, right? The new roles we're creating, of the 8 new roles, 6 of them are not cabinet roles, and so it's not like I'm just expanding the number of seats at the cabinet table. But it is important as we're talking about our city government that we have to say, if we are going to be more collaborative, if we're going to be more strategic, it requires capacity, right? We all just have so many hours in a day. And so if there isn't someone working on education and health, and there wasn't, a year ago, right, as the sole thing they were doing, then maybe that's the 4th or 5th or 6th thing on their priority list. And it's just hard for that to be enough of a priority to move forward on a big thing like universal pre-K, or on a small thing, or not relatively small, but something we talk about a long time, which is access to these community learning centers that were built with the promise they would be community centers in the evening and on weekends. And so a lot of what I view my role as is to take city government and not to come up with like the coolest new idea, the most creative new idea, but to take some of the things we've talked about for a long time and actually get them done. And so if that means adding a bunch of roles in Parks and Rec, then we're going to do that. If that means adding roles in finance, we're going to do that. These are some roles that I identified during the transition, and I couldn't do everything during the transition, right? The focus had to be on coming in as mayor to this space here on the 2nd floor. But absolutely, we're looking at where we can add roles. And I should mention these new roles, it's not like we've hired all these folks, right? This was really kind of our roadmap for roles we could hire over the course of the year. And so 5 of those 8 new roles are vacant right now, right? It's things that I think are really important, right? I think a public engagement person is really important to help us get some of this work done. But at the same time, I understand the concerns from council and some folks in the public. Even my old tennis coach from Firestone has shared his concerns, and he's a friend, and I care about him. But at the end of the day, we're going to figure out something that works. So if that means compromising on some of that and working through an amendment process with council, then we're going to do that. That's perfectly fine. That's how this process should work. There are amendments to the budget every year. But this is, it's not me. I'm not hiring, people to drive me around or anything like that. I really view this as making sure that we have a city government that folks aren't burnt out. And that means investing in police and fire. I mentioned the new roles that we're creating in parks maintenance and in the service department. And for instance, in the finance department right now, we're looking at how we improve our contracting process, yes. Right? And so once we look at that new contracting process, we can say, oh, well, maybe we need a new person here, and maybe we need a new person in payroll. And so, the budget evolves over the course of the year as well. So those are a few of the things I would say, and I hope that wasn't too defensive.
Cool. Thank you. All right, so probably going to do 2 more questions with the time we've got allotted. Sure. So my next question for you, why did the city make our property taxes go up so much?
Yeah, so you want to take this?
I'll take this one. Okay. So the city really we did not raise the property tax rate. So what happened is that the county, by state law, and all counties within the state of Ohio, probably literally within the United States, I think it's very similar in every state, will revalue all of the properties every 3 years. So every 3 years, there's either a triennial or a sexennial reappraisal of all the properties. So what happened is that the county did their process as they're required to do by state law and determined the new values of the properties located within Akron. So in Akron, the residential properties went up about 40% on average, which resulted in Akron's total, what we call the assessed valuation, and that controls the property tax that we collect, that the schools collect, that the county collects, so all of the various entities that collect property tax, it made those go up. So the city, as I said, our assessed valuation went up about 25%. But the city, we did not raise our property tax millage or anything like that. It's simply a function of that state mandated reappraisal process.
And we get that this is hard for folks, right? I mean, I look at what the value it says for my house right now, and I'm not sure that that's what it's actually worth. But at the end of the day, we have committed to not raising sewer rates this year. The previous administration did raise water rates at the end of last year, but we're trying to be responsible with city money. When we proposed the capital budget, it was the lowest amount of budgeted new debt in 7 years. And so we're trying to really not just this duo here, which I think is fairly fiscally conservative, but really our whole city government is trying to see how we can make thoughtful and meaningful investments. It's all taxpayer money. Even if we're talking about ARPA and the federal money, it's still taxpayer money at the end of the day. And so we're trying to be responsible with it. As we go forward, we want to make sure that, the city hasn't raised our income tax since 2017. I think we've tried to be very judicious in how that income tax was used. And so, we're going to continue to look at what the needs are of the community. But we also, and I give Mayor Horgan a lot of credit, and you a lot of credit, Steve. I think 8 years ago when Mayor Horgan started, the city's reserves were $5 million.
$5 million,
And now they're almost
about
30.
almost 29 million.
Yeah.
So.
And so that's, maybe it's not as high as we'd like it to be. I think that's always going to be true. But it's substantially higher. And so we are trying to be responsible with how we spend the public dollars.
Thank you. Lynn just asked in the comments, will there ever be an opportunity to get housing repair grants again?
Yes. So yes and. So right now with the Akron Home Repair Program, which is part of that ARPA federal money, we have a lot of 2 categories of applications that came in. Right, there's about 1,000 in I think Type A, and then 1,000 in Category B. And we're working through those, and we're trying to kind of reset the program, because if we're being candid, the program has not gone as smoothly as I think the administration or city council back last year when I was on city council would have liked. And so we're trying to kind of reboot things and particularly look at the work that's been done, because about 100 units that have been done. And so there's a lot left on the menu to do. But the other thing is, as we go forward, so there's not an open application right now that you can submit for housing repair. But as we go through with ARPA, it's not like when we're done with ARPA, we're just going to get rid of those addresses, right? We have those addresses. We will continue to look for, we have lead money from the state that we're looking at using some for some of these repairs. And as we go forward, we're going to be really aggressive in looking at state and federal funding that can help us, because the need is there. We look at the homeowners in this community, and folks just need a little bit of help with some ADA accessibility railing, a grab bar in the tub, some remediation with lead paint. So that's kind of how we're looking at it. Do you want to add anything, Steve?
Yeah, and one of the challenges has been with our ARPA, housing repair, was just the capacity of the contracting that's out there. So, it's just been hard to get enough contractors to perform the work that we wanted to do. So as the mayor said, we are kind of resetting the program and trying to come up with the best path forward for the remainder of the ARPA funds.
Yeah, but stay tuned, and hopefully if you send us a DM, they can send us a DM. We can kind of take a look and see if you're already on the list, or look at where your property is. But at the end of the day, this is something I hear a lot about when I go out to ward meetings. I know this is on people's mind. And I applaud the work that was done to set this program up. I think it's just now that we're, sometimes we think funding's the whole thing. And we're talking about the budget. Funding is the whole thing when it comes to the budget. But the implementation is a huge piece of it. And like Steve said, we want to kind of, now that we're over a year in, look, how can we kind of reboot this and get the implementation where it needs to go and get people some help?
Thank you. Someone else had asked, is there a budget for trash cleanup around the city on a regular basis? There is so much trash in my neighborhood.
So there is budget within our Department of Neighborhoods where they do litter cleanups, and we have some contracted, service contracts that perform that work. But yes, there is money within the Department of Neighborhoods for that purpose.
And then we also at the city are a really big partner with Keep Akron Beautiful, and Keep Akron Beautiful has done an amazing job, sponsoring especially volunteer trash pickup opportunities. I know Preserve the Valley is doing one right before the eclipse down in the Merriman Valley. So I know there's lots of opportunities, and we want to find ways that we can get people engaged. I know one time I was out there picking up trash, and I found a thing of an empty Giant Eagle like chicken thing, and it was like, who threw this out the window, right? So I don't know.
Love that journey for you. Okay, thank you. Let me just see if anything else is coming. Okay, other question that I have here. Instead of these new positions, could you put more money towards the water or sewer projects and lower our rates?
I think the one thing, and I'll let you do this, Steve, because it's a thing, but when we talk about the new money that is with these positions, it's $755,000, again, which I'm not saying is a small amount of money, but it is less than 1/10 of this annual budget. The sewer project is over $1 billion. And so when we look at the amount of debt that we have on the sewer project, even if we put all of the $145 million from ARPA and didn't do these community centers and didn't do the lead water mains and all of those things, even that would make it difficult. So,
right, and that's one of the things that I think we looked at. A big one of the priorities for the federal government when they gave us the ARPA money was specifically water projects. So, and that's something that we looked at initially, because obviously we have water capital needs here in the city, but we felt like our needs are so big that even the ARPA money really wouldn't make a huge impact on, what we would be able to do with our water infrastructure. So, yeah, the water and sewer capital expenditures are in the hundreds of millions of dollars. So, that's it, and they're really funded by different mechanisms. So within, with water and sewer user fees. So it really is kind of a different animal altogether.
And, I think it really is sometimes hard to compare the scale of things. I mean, when you drive down Akron Peninsula next to the sewer treatment plant, I mean, at one point, while they were doing some of these projects, there was, I think, about $500 million worth of work being done. And it looks just like a plant. It's a massive feat of engineering. But as we go through this, we are at the end of the consent decree. We are building our north side interceptor tunnel, and then we're working through the court process as to whether we need to build this last enhanced rate treatment facility, the EHRT, this $200 million facility at the end of the big downtown canal interceptor tunnel. And so whether we end up having to build that or not will have an impact on our water sewer plans going forward. But we're trying to go through this and try to find ways to cut down costs on the sewer project. And the previous administration, I think, was able to shave down
our engineers have been very successful in getting modified projects that are cheaper but will still achieve the same environmental impacts as what was originally looked at, and that saved us tens, if not hundreds, of millions of dollars for the sewer project.
Cool. That was our last question. So I will kick it back to Mayor for closing remarks.
Awesome. Well, just want to thank you, Steve.
Thank you.
Steve and everyone in the finance department, has spent a lot of time, especially over the last few weeks, on nights and weekends they're here, and really getting this budget done. But this is something, there's a whole audit and budget division of the city government. They work on the budget year round. And it really, for me, highlights we have hardworking, dedicated people in every part of the city government. And that's true of the budget process. And it's also true of how we go through the process with council. And so we wanted to kind of open that up for you and kind of share a little bit of information. We hope you can come 6 to 8 p.m. at Firestone. There's going to be small table discussions and then opportunity to ask us some fastball questions, hardball questions. But at the end of the day, this is your budget. This is taxpayer money. And so as we go through the process with council and we figure out where we make changes or what have you, we want something that everybody can see investments that they feel are worthwhile. And so that's my commitment going forward. Thank you.